My name is Angela Marin, and I am 70 years old. That number still doesn't sit right on my tongue. 70. It sounds like an afterthought, a closing chapter, something left behind on a dusty shelf. And yet, I'm still here, waking up each morning in a house that no longer hums with life, touching framed photos that seem to belong to someone else's story. I wasn't always alone. There was once Alfred, my Alfred, whose love felt like the sun, steady, warm, unrelenting. He was never a man of many words, but when he did speak, his voice carried the kind of quiet assurance that made you believe everything would be all right. For 42 years, I leaned on that steadiness. We raised our son, Gavin, in a home built more on love than money. In a neighborhood where kids still rode bikes and borrowed sugar from their neighbors. Alfred worked as a high school science teacher. I was a nurse before I gave it up to raise Gavin full-time. Our days were simple, and our nights were filled with laughter and long talks on the porch swing. When Gavin was born, I remember Alfred holding him like he was the most fragile miracle in the world. "He's our legacy," Alfred whispered, tears glistening in his eyes. And so we poured everything we had, our energy, our dreams, our every dollar, into raising him right. Private school, when we could barely afford it. Soccer camps, music lessons. Even when we had to skip vacations or patch holes in our clothes, Gavin never went without. Alfred died 5 years ago, and I haven't drawn a full breath since. He passed in the living room, in his favorite chair, the same place he used to read Gavin bedtime stories. Pancreatic cancer doesn't negotiate. It came fast and cruel. I watched the man who once lifted me with one arm shrink into someone small and trembling, and when he was gone, so was the warmth in our house. For a little while after, Gavin was my anchor. He moved back in, helped arrange the funeral, and held my hand during the sleepless nights. I clung to him, terrified of the silence Alfred left behind. "You've still got me, Mama," he'd say, brushing a tear from my cheek. He even stayed with me for 2 months after the funeral. I would make him chicken pot pie, his favorite, and we'd watch old sitcoms until midnight. But slowly, the air between us cooled. The visits became less frequent. He stopped calling as often. When he did call, he always sounded rushed, distracted. I used to picture him juggling a busy life, maybe a girlfriend, maybe work stress. But what I didn't want to admit was that his love was fading. Or worse, transforming into something transactional, conditional. The first time he asked for money, it was for car repairs. "Just a little help, Mama," he said. "I'll pay you back Friday." He didn't. A month later, it was for a security deposit on a new apartment. Then it was a startup investment he was really passionate about. I gave it all, every time. I dipped into Alfred's pension, even sold off a few of our silver heirlooms. I kept telling myself it was what Alfred would have wanted. But I knew my husband. Alfred would have sat Gavin down and made him look him in the eye. He would have told him a man's character is measured by how he treats the people who raised him, not how much he can extract from them. By the 3rd year of widowhood, I was back to heating canned soup for dinner and skipping dental checkups. Meanwhile, Gavin had a new car, designer shoes, and a different woman on his arm every 6 months. But I kept quiet, because hope, even when it's bitter, is hard to give up. Then one day, Gavin called with news. "I'm getting married, Mama." I felt my knees buckle slightly, gripping the edge of the counter to steady myself. "Oh, sweetheart," I said. "I'm so happy for you." And I was. I truly was. I imagined being involved, helping pick flowers, choosing cake flavors, folding invitations at the kitchen table like we used to do with holiday cards. I imagined being introduced as the proud mother of the groom, walking down the aisle beside my son, who once told me I was the strongest woman he'd ever known. Gavin's fiancée, Marissa, was a name I'd only heard in passing. He never brought her around, said she was intimidated by me. That was my first hint. The second was when I received the wedding planning packet in my email. Not addressed with affection or even a phone call, but with a list of vendors and a polite note saying, "If you're able to help, Here's where we're still short. Still short. I told myself it didn't matter. I transferred money from my savings, paid the florist, covered half the venue deposit, ordered the cake myself when Marissa forgot, all without complaint. I wanted to make it perfect. I wanted to be needed again. And yet, as the wedding date approached, I heard less and less from Gavin. He never asked how I was doing, never visited. He sent short texts, often days apart. But I told myself that once I saw him in his tuxedo, once we shared that mother-son dance, it would all be worth it. What a fool I was. The night before the wedding, I sat in my quiet home, folding Gavin's childhood baby blanket on my lap. I had set out the pearl earrings Alfred gave me on our 30th anniversary. My navy blue dress hung on the door, simple, elegant, with tiny beadwork around the collar. I whispered to the photograph of Alfred on my nightstand. I hope I make you proud tomorrow. I hope our son remembers who I am. But somewhere deep inside, I felt the chill of what was coming. Something had shifted. Something irreparable. And I wasn't ready for what Marissa would do next. I was crocheting a scarf I'd started 3 winters ago when the phone rang. A dusty blue thing unraveling in my lap. Each loop a small attempt to fill the silence that had grown like ivy in this house since Alfred passed. The rain outside was tapping on the kitchen window, a quiet kind of melancholy rhythm, like the world was sighing with me. I looked at the caller ID, and my heart gave that strange, fluttering skip. Noah, my grandson, Gavin's only child from his first marriage, 17 now. Sharp-witted, awkward, with a mop of unruly brown curls, and a laugh that reminded me so painfully of his father when he was young, back when he used to need me. I pressed the phone to my ear, already smiling. Noah! What a surprise, darling. It's so good to hear your voice. Hi, Grandma, he said, quiet, cautious. I'm okay. I'm calling because, well, Dad asked me to. And just like that, the warmth drained from the moment. Of course he did. Gavin always sent others to do his uncomfortable errands. I braced myself. Oh? I said gently. What's the news? There was a pause on the other end, a long breath like he was wading into something cold. Dad's getting married again, to this woman, Jennifer. I sat perfectly still, the yarn slipping from my lap to the floor. Jennifer, I repeated. The name felt foreign, like a stone in my mouth. I see. They've been together for a while, I guess, Noah continued, his words quick now, like he wanted to say it all before he lost the nerve. She's got a daughter, too, Taylor. She's 19. They've already moved in together. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. A woman I had never met was living in the house Gavin once asked me to help pay the mortgage on. A girl barely older than my grandson now shared his roof, and I hadn't been told until today. I swallowed. I didn't even know he was seeing anyone. Noah was quiet again. Yeah. He said he didn't want to overwhelm you. The word cut deep, as if I were a fragile thing, as if I couldn't be trusted with the details of my own son's life, as if I were some delicate glass relic to be placed on a shelf and forgotten. And they're getting married, I said slowly, recovering my voice. When? 6 weeks from Saturday. My heart gave a stutter. 6 weeks. That was barely enough time to buy a dress, let alone plan a wedding. Then again, I had a sinking feeling I wouldn't be involved in any of the planning. Noah hesitated. There's more. He wanted me to tell you because, well, they picked the venue. Hilltop Manor, I blinked. That name I recognized. Hilltop Manor was the kind of place you saw in bridal magazines, the kind with hand-carved chandeliers, valet parking, gold-trimmed china, and cocktail napkins printed with initials in embossed foil. The kind of place that came with a 6-figure price tag. And? I asked, my voice thin. Noah cleared his throat. He was hoping you'd pay for it, he said. He said you might want to contribute, like as a wedding gift. My world tilted slightly. This wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't a request wrapped in love or nostalgia. It was a transaction, an invoice delivered through my grandson. My stomach twisted with something ugly. Anger, maybe, or heartbreak. I couldn't quite tell them apart anymore. Still, I kept my voice soft. Did he say anything else? Noah hesitated. He said it would mean a lot if you supported them, that Jennifer really wants to start things fresh. No drama. And he said, if you could help with the costs, it'd go a long way. There it was again. Support. No drama. A long way. All polite words that really meant pay, stay quiet, stay out of the way. But beneath my disbelief, deeper still, there was something far more dangerous. Hope. Because maybe, just maybe, if I gave them what they wanted, I'd finally get what I had lost. Not the money, not the status. Just a seat at the table, a phone call once a week, a place in their life. Yes, I said quietly. Tell your father I'll pay for the wedding. Wait, really? Noah sounded startled. Yes, I said again, firmer this time. I'll call Hilltop Manor in the morning. Tell him to give them my name for the deposit. Noah let out a breath. Wow, that's awesome, Grandma. Thanks. He hung up quickly, the way teenagers do when they've delivered their message. I sat there long after the call ended, staring into my tea gone cold. That night, I opened my safe and pulled out the folder. Alfred's savings. What was left of it? I'd told myself it was for emergencies. But what greater emergency is there than being forgotten by your only child? I stared at the balance. Enough for the wedding, barely. Enough to buy myself another year of relevance. Another shot at being someone Gavin couldn't ignore. But as I lay in bed, the wind howling outside, I whispered into the dark. Alfie, would you forgive me if I gave him everything? One more time? I didn't sleep, not a minute. Because some part of me already knew I wasn't being invited back into their lives. I was buying admission to a party I'd never be allowed to enjoy. The appointment was for 2:30 sharp at the Hilltop Manor Bridal Suite. I arrived early, clutching a manila folder full of receipts and printouts like it was a shield. The hotel itself was stunning. White columns, climbing roses, a marble fountain gurgling gently outside the glass entry doors. It was exactly the kind of place I never imagined I'd step foot in, let alone pay for. I'd worn my best. A slate gray dress with silver embroidery, the one I wore to my friend Edith's memorial last spring. Conservative, respectful, lined and modest. Alfred always said it made me look serene. I'd curled my hair and dusted on some of the pink blush I save for special occasions. I wasn't trying to upstage anyone. I just wanted to be taken seriously. Inside, the scent of peonies and vanilla clung thick in the air. The wedding planner, a woman named Brienne, in stilettos far too high for comfort, greeted me with a strained smile and a clipboard that seemed surgically attached to her hand. Oh, Mrs. Marin, you're early. We're just finishing up with Jennifer and her daughter. Come on in. I followed her down a hall lined with soft golden sconces and muted artwork until we reached a room that looked more like a boutique than an office. Plush chairs, floor-length mirrors, racks of gowns, and a silver tray of macarons. Jennifer sat cross-legged on a blush pink chaise, her stiletto tapping impatiently, phone in hand. Her daughter, Taylor, lounged beside her, scrolling on her phone, popping gum like a teenager on detention. Jennifer looked up, her smile mechanical. Angela, you made it! Great! She didn't rise to greet me. Have a seat, Brienne said, motioning toward a velvet chair that was visibly lower than the others. I sat. Brienne pulled out a seating chart. So, we just want to confirm a few final details. The head table will include the bride, groom, maid of honor, best man, and both sets of parents. I blinked. Both sets? Jennifer cleared her throat. Well, that's the traditional setup, but we've made some adjustments. Brienne didn't flinch. Actually, Angela, we'll be placing you at table 6. It's right near the bar. Lovely view of the dance floor. Table 6. I stared at the chart. Gavin's mother, seated near the bar, while Jennifer's mother, her second husband even, sat at the front, next to the cake table. Jennifer must have sensed my hesitation. Her smile tightened. It's just that the head table's a little full, and we really want a balanced aesthetic, you understand. Besides, you'll be with the other mature guests. It'll be more comfortable. Mature guests. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Brienne quickly flipped to another page. Now let's talk about attire. We're asking that all mothers of the bride and groom adhere to the wedding palette. Jennifer perked up, her voice gaining sudden energy. Right, so no navy, no gray, no ivory, no pastels. We're going with a very specific theme: champagne blush and warm golds. Anything too muted or, matronly just won't work in the photos. She glanced at my dress, with an expression that could have curdled milk. And we'd really love for everyone to have an updo. Tight, polished, no curls. Something elegant. If you need recommendations, I have a stylist who can fit you in the morning of. You'll just need to pay her directly. I felt the blood drain from my face. I'm sorry, I managed. I've already had my dress tailored. Oh, no, Jennifer cut in quickly, waving a perfectly manicured hand. That won't work. Honestly, Angela, this is Gavin's big day. We just want everyone to look cohesive, not distracting. Distracting. My hands were trembling now. I pressed them to my lap. And my jewelry? Jennifer tilted her head, eyes narrowing. Maybe something a bit less bold. Pearls are fine. No statement pieces. Nothing too, vintage looking. Taylor snorted. Yeah, like no dead grandma vibes. They both laughed. I sat there frozen. My wedding ring, Alfred's ring, the one I wore on a chain around my neck, suddenly felt like a target. Brienne moved on. So, the florist will provide corsages, but Jennifer was thinking you could also help coordinate the vendor tips after the reception? It'll be smoother if one person handles all the envelopes. Jennifer nodded enthusiastically. Oh, and we thought you might want to cover the honeymoon suite upgrade as your personal gift. It's only a few hundred more. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because in that moment, I realized something horrifying. I wasn't the mother of the groom. I was the sponsor. I was the bank. A propriedad. They didn't see me, not as a mother, not as family. I was a checkbook with graying hair. And even then, I wasn't good enough. Not for their pictures. Not for their table. And certainly not for their perfect pastel wedding aesthetic. I stood up slowly. Brienne glanced up, surprised. Is everything okay, Mrs. Marin? I'll consider the suggestions, I said, forcing a smile that felt like breaking glass. And then I walked out, heels clicking softly down the gleaming hallway, past the fountain, past the valet who opened the door like I still belonged. But I didn't. Not really, not anymore. The morning of the wedding, I woke before dawn. I hadn't slept, not really. I'd lain in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the ticking of the clock on the wall, the one Alfred had given me on our 30th anniversary. I'd counted the seconds between betrayal and hope, grief and humiliation. I dressed slowly, carefully. My new champagne-colored gown hung from the closet door like a reminder. It fit tightly at the ribs and felt foreign against my skin, as if it belonged to someone else. My reflection in the mirror was elegant, polished, and completely unrecognizable. I had followed every instruction: neutral makeup, sleek bun, pearls instead of Alfred's ring. Jennifer had said she wanted a cohesive aesthetic. I looked like a wax version of myself. The real Angela was folded away somewhere, packed into the purse I clutched as I walked into Hilltop Manor. The venue was breathtaking. I'll give her that. White rose petals littered the marble steps, golden lanterns floated beside manicured hedges, and a quartet played soft classical music by the fountain. The guests arrived in droves, silks and tuxedos, laughter and perfume trailing behind them. I was directed to table 6. It was near the bar, just like they'd promised, tucked in the far back corner of the ballroom, half shadowed by a column. My place card read, Mrs. A. Marin, in script, that looked rushed and generic. Around me were elderly distant relatives, an ex-coworker of Jennifer's mother, and a man who introduced himself as Gregory. I think I dated Jennifer's cousin once. No one knew who I was. When I told them, the reactions were always the same. A blink, a forced smile, and then, "Oh, I thought her mother was the one in the gold dress up front." That woman, Cynthia, was everywhere, in the front row of the ceremony, wrapped in Gavin's arms for the photos, whispering to Jennifer with theatrical intimacy. At one point, I saw her hand Gavin a glass of champagne and brush invisible lint from his lapel. He laughed. He hadn't even said hello to me. During the ceremony, I craned my neck to see through a forest of floral centerpieces taller than my seated height. Gavin looked stunning. I'd always thought he was handsome, but in that tuxedo, he looked like something from a movie. Smiling, strong, proud. None of that was for me. They kissed. Everyone clapped. I joined politely, though my palms stung with resentment. The usher herded the guests toward the grand staircase for photos. I followed behind the crowd, clutching the strap of my purse, waiting. I stood near the marble banister, watching Jennifer gather her family into clusters. Her mother, her stepfather, her daughter Taylor. Gavin stood between them, arms slung casually around Taylor's shoulder like they'd known each other forever. The photographer chirped commands. "Now just the bride's family, just the groom and his new stepdaughter. Let's do one of Jennifer and her parents." I waited. And waited. At one point, Brienne, the wedding planner, noticed me hovering and gave me that awful smile. Tight-lipped, pitying. "Oh, we already did the family photos earlier, but maybe we can grab a candid of you with the cake later, okay?" A candid with the cake. That was my place now. Dinner followed, roast duck, glazed carrots, wine in tall crystal glasses. I barely touched it. I couldn't swallow past the lump in my throat. Cynthia stood to make her toast first. To Jennifer, the light of our lives, and to Gavin, who has shown us what grace and gentleness look like. We are so lucky to call you our son. Applause, laughter. Gavin raised his glass next. To Jennifer, my partner, my best friend, my home, and to her family, who welcomed me like I was their own from the start. Thank you for showing me what true love looks like. I didn't hear the rest. I stared down at my linen napkin, folded into an ornate shape. The room around me blurred. I wasn't mentioned. Not once. No thank you. No recognition for paying for the chair he was sitting in, the food on the plates, the wine in his glass. I didn't expect a speech in my honor, but I expected acknowledgement. I expected a son who would say, "That's my mother, the reason I'm standing here today." Instead, I was wallpaper. Until I wasn't. It happened during the dancing. I had returned to my seat after an awkward solo trip to the restroom, only to find Jennifer already standing by my table, fury rolling off her in waves. She didn't lower her voice. "What are you doing?" I froze. "I'm just sitting." "You're sulking. Do you realize people have asked me twice today who you are? Do you know how embarrassing that is for me?" I blinked. "I haven't said anything to anyone." "Well, maybe that's the problem," she snapped. "You're sitting there like a statue, all cold and bitter and weird. You're throwing off the energy of the whole room." Several heads turned. Conversations quieted. I stood slowly, trying to diffuse whatever fuse she had lit. "I didn't mean to cause a scene." "You're always making it about you," she shrieked. "I've been polite. I let you come, but you're ruining everything. Everything." From across the room, I saw Gavin. I looked to him, eyes pleading. "Please, son, please say something. Stand up for me." He walked toward us slowly, drink in hand. And then he said it. "Mom, maybe it's time you left." Just like that. No apology, no explanation, just the final push off the cliff. The air left my lungs in one long, silent scream. "You want me to go?" He didn't even meet my eyes. "It's been a long day." I stared at him. At the boy I had once held through chickenpox and nightmares, who used to call me his hero. At the man I had paid to celebrate while sitting in the shadows. At the stranger I no longer recognized. And I nodded. I see, I whispered. I walked past the dance floor, past the tables of people pretending not to watch. I walked past the photographers and the lanterns and the fountain, out into the night, and I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't devastated, but because tears are for grief. And what I felt now was something else entirely. I was done, but they weren't, because what came next would make sure they never forgot who I really was. The silence of the house was thick that morning, the kind that presses against your ears and reminds you how alone you really are. It had been 4 days since the wedding, 4 days since I left the reception like an uninvited guest at a stranger's celebration. 4 days since I sat in my car gripping the steering wheel, repeating to myself, "Don't cry, don't cry. Don't let them see it was the last thing you had." And not a word from Gavin. Not even a message to ask if I'd made it home safe. But the vendors? They called. They emailed. They were frantic. The florist was threatening legal action. The venue's billing department left 2 voicemails, both escalating in tone. The string quartet sent a politely worded invoice with urgent stamped at the top. It was all unraveling, and I let it. I had paid deposits, yes, but the final payments? They hadn't cleared, because I'd stopped them. Every last one. I'd gone to the bank the morning after the wedding, stood in line behind a man depositing coins into a jar, and instructed the teller, calmly and precisely, to halt every outstanding transaction related to Hilltop Manor. When she asked why, I told her, "Because I'm tired of funding people who pretend I'm dead." That's what I had become to them. A ghost who signed checks. And then, at exactly 10:17 a.m., the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and felt my stomach clench. Standing on my porch were Cynthia and Martin Blaine, Jennifer's parents. The 2 of them looked like something out of a luxury catalog. Cynthia in her knee-length camel coat and pearls. Martin in a pressed navy blazer, his hands folded neatly in front of him. They didn't come to talk. They came to collect. I opened the door, just a crack. "Angela," Cynthia said, her voice a carefully curated blend of pleasantry and condescension. "We thought we'd stop by for a quick chat. May we?" I should have said no, but I didn't. I stepped aside, and they walked in like they owned the place. Cynthia's eyes scanned my living room with the detached disinterest of a realtor sizing up a teardown. Martin offered a tight smile and didn't remove his coat. "Please," I said, gesturing stiffly. "Sit." Cynthia perched on the edge of the couch, legs crossed elegantly. Martin remained standing. "We wanted to speak to you about some confusion," Cynthia began. "There seems to be an issue with the vendors." "A lapse in payment." "No lapse," I replied. "Just a decision." Her eyes flickered. "Excuse me?" "I've canceled the payments. All of them." Cynthia blinked, momentarily stunned. "I don't understand. You agreed to fund the wedding." "I agreed," I said, voice steady, "because I believed I was part of it." Martin cleared his throat, stepping forward. "With all due respect, Mrs. Marin, this isn't about feelings. There are legal agreements in place." I turned to him slowly. "And who signed those agreements? Not me. My name isn't on a single contract. You see, I offered help. I didn't guarantee anything. And certainly not to people who treat me like wallpaper." Cynthia's smile slipped. "Angela, I understand you may have felt overlooked. But this is about Gavin and Jennifer. They're starting their life together, and now they're being threatened with lawsuits because you've made a personal choice." "No," I said. "They're facing consequences for how they treated the person who made that life possible." Cynthia leaned forward. "I'm sorry, but I have to ask. What exactly do you expect to gain from this? Are you trying to punish them? Humiliate them?" I stared at her. "No," I said. "I just want to stop paying to be disrespected." Martin scoffed. "You know, Gavin never speaks highly of you." Something in my chest stilled. "I beg your pardon?" "He always said you were overbearing, that you made him feel guilty for moving on, that you were stuck in the past. I didn't believe it at first, But after seeing how you've handled this, I see what he meant." The words landed like stones. But I didn't flinch. I stood taller. "Your daughter screamed at me during her wedding," I said quietly, "in front of over 100 people, called me bitter, embarrassing, told me to leave." "She was emotional," Cynthia began. "She was cruel," I cut in, and Gavin stood beside her. He didn't defend me. He didn't speak. He told me to go, and I did. But I didn't walk out poor. I walked out powerful. Martin shook his head. "You raised a man who's too soft to confront you, and now you're sabotaging his future because of some perceived slight." I looked at him hard. "No," I said. "I raised a boy who lost his way. And if you think I'm the one to blame, maybe that says more about how you define strength." Cynthia rose, brushing invisible dust from her coat. "You're going to regret this. You're choosing bitterness over family." I walked to the door. "Number, I'm choosing dignity." I opened it wide. Martin joined her, his mouth tight with disapproval. "You're burning bridges, Angela." "They were already ashes," I replied. They stepped outside. Cynthia turned one last time. "We'll be speaking to a lawyer." I nodded. "So will I." And then I shut the door. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was sacred. For the first time in years, my house felt like it belonged to me again. No voices telling me to shrink. No demands for checks. Just the quiet strength of knowing that I finally had drawn a line. And the next time they crossed it, they'd find more than silence waiting for them. The sun was barely up when I heard the knock. No, not a knock, a fist. A barrage of fists. Heavy, rhythmic, angry. I was still in my robe, my hair unbrushed, the tea kettle just starting to whistle. My body tensed as if it already knew. I walked slowly to the door, heart hammering in my chest. I peered through the peephole. Gavin. My son. He hadn't come to check on me after the wedding. He hadn't called, hadn't sent a single message, not even to say, "Are you all right?" After the bride he chose humiliated me in front of 120 guests. But now, here he was, fists clenched, pacing on my porch like a man wronged. I opened the door slowly. He didn't wait to be invited in. He stormed past me, into my living room, like he owned the place. Like this house wasn't mortgaged by memories and soaked in sacrifices he'd never bothered to acknowledge. "I just got off the phone with the venue," he spat, spinning to face me. "They're threatening legal action. The caterers are panicking. The photographer says they won't release anything until the balance is paid." "What the hell, Mom?" I said nothing. "Did you really cancel the payments?" he demanded. I nodded once. Calm, firm, yes. I did. He gaped at me like I'd slapped him. "Why? You agreed to pay for it. You promised." "I promised," I said evenly, "before I was publicly humiliated, before your wife screamed at me in front of the guests, before you stood there, silent, while I was told to leave your wedding like a stranger who'd crashed the reception." He blinked. His hands twitched at his sides. "She was upset," he said. "It was a high-stress day. You were being difficult." Difficult. I almost laughed. "I sat in the back, Gavin. I didn't speak. I wasn't in the photos. I wasn't introduced. I didn't even get a mention in the speeches. Your wife dictated what I wore, how I styled my hair, what jewelry I could have on my own neck, because I wasn't allowed to clash with her aesthetic. I swallowed every slight. And still I came. Still I smiled. Still I paid." "You weren't supportive." "I wasn't even acknowledged," I snapped, the words cracking out of me like thunder. "Not once. Not for the money. Not for raising you. Not for being the one who kept you fed and clothed and loved after your father died. I gave up everything for you, Gavin, and you let them treat me like I was nothing." He looked stunned, like he hadn't expected me to shout. But I wasn't finished. "You stood at that altar and thanked them. Her family, her mother, her stepfather. You called them your new home. And when she attacked me, in public, you didn't speak. You didn't defend me. You didn't even look at me." His voice was lower now, defensive. "I didn't want to cause a scene." "Oh, But letting your mother be humiliated wasn't a scene? Letting me be pushed out of the one day I helped create wasn't a betrayal? I needed you to be the bigger person. I stepped forward, eyes burning. I was the bigger person, Gavin. I paid for a wedding I wasn't wanted at. I played along with a family that never accepted me. I gave and gave and gave. And you never once gave me your voice. Not when I needed it most. He ran a hand through his hair. You don't understand what kind of pressure I've been under. Jennifer's been crying for days. Her parents are furious. They're threatening to sue. They already came here, I said coolly. Cynthia and Martin sat right where you're standing. Called me manipulative. Called you emotionally weak. Told me I raised you wrong. He flinched. What? Apparently, I didn't raise a man. I raised an ATM. One they expected to have unlimited access to through me. His mouth opened, then closed. And then, he did what I feared he would. You're selfish! There it was. The blow he'd been holding. You always have to be the center of attention. This was supposed to be our day, and you made it about you. You embarrassed me. You made Jennifer feel like an outsider in her own wedding. You've broken this family over your pride. I stared at him, stunned. A slow, cold anger began to bloom in my chest. No, Gavin, I didn't break this family. You did. His eyes narrowed. You broke it the moment you decided being liked by your in-laws mattered more than loving your mother. You broke it when you let your wife treat me like dirt and said nothing. You broke it when you chose to erase me from your life because I didn't fit the aesthetic of your perfect little fantasy. He said nothing. You want to talk about pride? I continued. You mean the pride that paid for your education? The pride that sent you to soccer camp while I wore the same winter coat for 9 years? The pride that sat in the audience at every school play, every graduation, every scraped knee and heartbreak? I stepped back. You want the rest of the money, Gavin? You won't get it, not a dime. You don't get to call me when you need help and ignore me the rest of the time. I'm done being your safety net. You can figure this out with your wife. Since she's your new family, maybe her parents can cover the bill. He stood in the middle of my living room, breathing hard, fists trembling. I can't believe this. You're choosing money over me. No, I said quietly. I'm choosing me. He stared at me for a long time. His mouth opened once more, but whatever words he had shriveled on his tongue. He turned. He left. And I didn't follow. For the first time in years, I didn't chase after his approval. I didn't call out to remind him how much I'd done. I didn't beg to be forgiven for wounds I didn't cause. I just stood there, solid, unmoving, and free. I had spent nearly 50 years in that house. I had painted its walls with Alfred, hand in hand, long before Gavin could walk. I had cooked thousands of dinners in that narrow kitchen, stood by that battered window to watch the rain, lit candles for holidays that no one came home for. I had walked barefoot across its wooden floors at 3 a.m. when Gavin was sick, when he was crying, when he couldn't sleep without knowing I was close. And now? Now, the house was a mausoleum, silent and stiff, filled with reminders of a family that no longer wanted me. It was the wedding that broke the illusion. But the rot had been spreading for years. The morning after Gavin stormed out of my living room, I stood in the dining room and realized I didn't want to wait for him to come back. I didn't want to hope anymore. Hope was a slow poison, and I'd swallowed enough to last a lifetime. So I called the realtor. By the end of the week, the "For Sale" sign stood crooked in my front lawn. Strangers walked through my home with clipboards and polite smiles, commenting on things I'd loved like they were defects. Oh, a bit outdated. This wallpaper would have to go. I smiled, nodded, packed. I didn't leave a forwarding address. I didn't notify Gavin. I didn't tell Jennifer, Cynthia, Martin, or anyone remotely tied to that awful day. I told one person, Noah, just Noah. His message came the same night. Just 4 words. I understand. I'm sorry. I cried for 20 minutes, and then I left. My new flat was nothing like the house. It was modern, clean, stainless steel and white tile, too small for old memories to follow me in. I bought everything new: couch, curtains, teacups, even a kettle that whistled at a different pitch. I signed the deed with hands that didn't shake. The building had a concierge. Cameras, key card entry, no mailbox with my name, no public listing. If Gavin came looking, if Jennifer sent her threats in person, they would find nothing, not even a shadow. For the first time in my life, I was unreachable. And I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The first voicemail came the day after I moved in. I hadn't even unpacked the dishes. I recognized her voice before she said her name. Jennifer. Her tone was syrupy at first, measured, dangerous. Angela, I hope you're proud of yourself. You made a mockery of our wedding. You embarrassed your own son. And now you think you can disappear without consequences? She took a breath, voice dropping to a growl. We will find you! You will pay! You think this is over. It's not. I stood frozen in my new kitchen, the knife in my hand, hovering over an apple I suddenly didn't want to eat. The second message was worse. The venue is threatening to sue us. Do you know how much the band cost? The cake? The makeup artist walked out mid-ceremony. We looked ridiculous in half of our photos. You ruined it. I blocked her number. The emails came next. From fake addresses, burner accounts, each one more vile than the last. You're a disgrace to mothers. You'll die alone in that ugly little flat. We're coming for everything you have left. It wasn't just cruelty. It was desperation. Cynthia sent an email too. More formal, but the same venom underneath. Angela, you may believe you've acted with dignity, but you've cost your son dearly. His reputation, his finances, his marriage, all are strained because of your bitterness. You owe it to him to fix what you broke. Silence will not protect you. I didn't respond. I saved every message. My lawyer, yes, I had a lawyer now, advised me to keep records, and so I did. Every word, every veiled threat, every attempt to guilt me into servitude. And still, they didn't stop. One evening, just before dinner, my building's concierge called me on the intercom. His voice was careful, professional. Miss Angela, there's a woman downstairs asking for you. Says she's your daughter-in-law's mother. I froze. Tell her, I said slowly, that no one by that name lives here. A pause. Yes, ma'am. I peeked through the blinds. 10th floor. Clear view of the street. There she was. Cynthia. Standing on the sidewalk in that same camel coat, heels clicking on the concrete as she paced. She held her phone like she was waiting for a call she knew wouldn't come. She stayed 13 minutes. Then she got into a black car and left. I closed the blinds and stood very still. This wasn't about the money anymore. It was about control, about punishing me for stepping out of line, for saying no, for walking away without asking permission. But what they hadn't counted on was that I was no longer afraid. Because in this new place, in this quiet, bright flat, I had something I hadn't had in years. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, freedom. And the silence they left behind? It was the most peaceful sound I'd ever heard. Some absences feel like silence. Others feel like screaming. Noah's silence was the second kind. After everything, the wedding, the betrayal, the sale of my house, the ghosting from Gavin, the venom from Jennifer, what hurt the most wasn't the accusations or the loss of my son. It was the wall going up around Noah. Brick by invisible brick. Not built by him, but around him. A prison of influence. A cage lined with whispered lies and forced obedience. I felt it the way you feel weather change in your joints. Subtle. Creeping. I would glance at my phone and expect to see his name flash across the screen. Hi, Nana, want to get coffee? Or, I miss your banana bread. But there was nothing. Just the quiet space where his voice used to live. It hadn't been that long ago that he came over on weekends, that he helped me carry in groceries, that he curled up on my couch with a movie, letting me stroke his hair like he was still 8 years old and not 17. I never asked for much. I never needed grand gestures, just the simple truth that someone still saw me. But now, Gone. At first, I made excuses. Maybe he was busy, exams, friends. Maybe Gavin was embarrassed after the wedding and wanted space. I texted. Lightly, lovingly. Hope school is going well, sweetheart. Made that spicy lasagna you used to love. Thought of you. I'm still here. Always. No reply. I left voicemails. I didn't want to sound desperate, so I pretended to be breezy. Just checking in. Love you. Still nothing. After 2 weeks, I tried calling. This time, the phone rang once, then went straight to voicemail. And the next day, the number was disconnected. Disconnected. Like I was the mistake they were trying to erase. That's when I knew this wasn't just teenage distraction. This was calculated. I emailed. Once, then again. Then, with trembling fingers, I wrote a message that was equal parts love letter and plea. Noah, I don't know if you're getting these. I just want you to know you're loved. That hasn't changed. It never will. I didn't expect a reply, but a few days later, one came. From a hidden number. A message so short, it shattered me more than anything else in this cruel little saga. Grandma, I can't talk to you. They check everything. I'm sorry. I didn't forget you. That was all. I read it over and over until the words blurred into salt and grief. I pressed my phone to my chest and whispered, I know, sweetheart. I know. Because what else can a grandmother say to a child being held hostage by the people who should be his protectors? I imagined the war waged behind their doors. Jennifer, pacing like a queen in exile, railing against toxic people and manipulative elders. Gavin, standing somewhere in the background, arms crossed, spine bent, eyes glazed, allowing it all. Maybe he believed her. Maybe he didn't care. But Noah, he was still trying. He found a way to reach me through the cracks, and now they were sealing them shut. I started noticing strange things. One day, I saw a black SUV idling outside my new building, the same one that had been there the day Cynthia tried to drop by. I watched from the 10th floor, unseen. A figure sat behind the tinted glass, then drove off when no one came out. I changed the password to my email. I disabled location sharing on every device. I told the concierge that no visitors were to be admitted unless I personally called down. But even with all my precautions, I couldn't keep them from what they'd already taken. Noah. Not physically, not completely, but emotionally, they were draining him. I imagined Jennifer hovering over him at dinner, snapping at him to put the phone down, calling me that woman, twisting her lips in mockery when he asked about me. I imagined Gavin never speaking up, not once, just letting it happen, and I thought of Noah sitting in his room, maybe with tears in his eyes, knowing that if he reached out again, it would come with punishment. I didn't blame him, but it didn't hurt any less. One night, I sat with the keepsake box on my lap. Inside were years of treasures. The macaroni necklace Noah made me when he was 5, his kindergarten graduation photo, a crumpled napkin with a scribble that said, I love you, Nana, in crooked block letters. I ran my fingers over each item, as if by touching them, I could bring back the warmth. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote a letter, not an email, not a message, a real letter, pen and paper, ink that stains and doesn't vanish with a click. Dear Noah, if you ever find this, it means you looked. It means you remembered. I want you to know that none of this was your fault. Not one bit. You are not responsible for the silence others forced between us, and I have never, not for 1 second, stopped loving you. One day, when you're ready, I'll be here, waiting. Not with guilt, not with anger, just with open arms. Because real love doesn't vanish, Noah. It doesn't fold under pressure. It waits, it believes, and it forgives. All my love, Nana. I sealed the letter, pressed it to my lips, and placed it inside the keepsake box. One day, I would give it to him. One day, when they no longer controlled his every thought, when the fog lifted, when he came looking for the truth, and when he did, he'd find me here, alive, unashamed, and still loving him with the same quiet strength I had always offered. It was a Tuesday, late morning, when I walked into the city library, not for anything in particular, just a need to be among the books, the kind of comfort only old pages and quiet corners could give. I'd been going more often lately. The flat was peaceful, yes, but there were days when the silence became too solid, too pressing. I needed the company of words. I wandered toward the fiction aisle, British novels, my favorite, and ran my fingers along the spines, lingering on the familiar names. Ishiguro, Atkinson, McEwan. Then I heard it. A voice, hesitant but certain. Angela Marin? I turned slowly. A man stood just a few feet away. Tall, a little bent at the shoulders, a kind face framed by a crown of silver-streaked hair. His jacket was slightly wrinkled, and he held a copy of Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy under one arm. It took me a second. But then it hit me. A memory from a lifetime ago. "Robert Alden?" I asked. He smiled, and it was like opening a long-forgotten window. "You haven't changed a bit," he said. "Oh, you liar," I replied, and laughed for the first time in days. We found a bench near the large arched window, surrounded by the smell of aging paper and worn carpet. The sunlight streamed in golden patches, making everything feel oddly sacred. We talked for over an hour. We reminisced about our years at the Department of Public Records, about the dreadful office coffee and Mrs. Hawthorne's ever-changing collection of brooches. He'd been in digitization. I was on the 4th floor with administration. We didn't know each other well then, shared a few lunchroom chats, the occasional office party, but he remembered me, and more importantly, he remembered Alfred. "You used to bring him around sometimes," Robert said. "Tall, quiet. But you'd light up when he entered the room. I always noticed that." I looked down, a smile playing on my lips. "I did. He was the calm in the chaos." "And Gavin?" My smile faltered. "He's elsewhere these days." Robert didn't press. He didn't ask about Jennifer, or the wedding, or why my eyes suddenly looked like they'd forgotten how to sparkle. Instead, he nodded, and changed the subject to books. It was a mercy I hadn't expected. We met again the next week. Then again. Always unplanned. Then eventually, planned. Coffee after the library. A walk in the park. A visit to the botanical garden, where he pointed out obscure flower names like a professor of blooms. He was never intrusive, never too eager, just quietly kind. In time, I told him about Gavin, about the wedding, about what Jennifer had said, about how my own son had stood silent while his wife screamed at me in front of 100 people, about the way Noah had been pulled from my life like a toy snatched away mid-hug. Robert listened. No interruptions, no advice, just presence. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "That's not the life you deserved." I blinked hard. Not from pain, from the shocking weight of being seen. We started meeting regularly. We didn't call it dating. It wasn't the romance of youth, frantic and heady. It was better, measured and warm. A companionship built on mutual scars and unexpected laughter. He told me he used to travel more, before his knees went. That he had a sister, Maureen, who lived in a small village on the coast. "She's always pestering me to visit, says I don't breathe enough fresh air." "Maybe she's right," I said. A pause. "She has a cottage," he continued, "right near the cliffs. You can hear the sea when you open the window. She says the gulls are aggressive, but the sunsets are worth it." I smiled. "Sounds lovely." Another pause. Then he looked at me, not nervously, but gently. "You could come with me this summer. Maureen wouldn't mind. She actually might like you more than she likes me." My breath caught, not because I was surprised, but because it had been so long since someone had simply wanted me near. "You're serious?" I wouldn't have said it if I wasn't. I looked out the library window, watching the light play across the pages of an open book left behind on a table. "I haven't been to the sea in years," I said. "Not since Gavin was little." "Then maybe it's time." I said yes 2 days later. And the next time we met, Robert brought me a small notebook, the kind with a ribbon bookmark and an embossed cover. "For the seaside," he said, "you'll want to write there." And just like that, for the first time in months, years maybe, I felt something unfamiliar swell in my chest. Not grief, not fear, hope, not for Gavin to come back, not for Jennifer to apologize, not even for Noah to find his way home to me. Hope for me, for days without ache, for salt air and sun on my face, for a new chapter that didn't revolve around sacrifice or pain or being invisible. The story wasn't over, it was changing scenes. And this time, I was no longer a background character. When Robert and I stepped off the train, the scent of the sea met us like an old friend. It was warm and briny, thick with salt and memory, and it struck me so deeply I had to pause. For a moment, I thought I might cry. But I didn't. I inhaled. Then I smiled. Maureen's seaside cottage was nestled among lavender bushes and wild hydrangea, with ivy climbing up whitewashed walls and a red door that looked like it belonged in a children's storybook. The path to the house curved gently past wind-worn fences, and from the back patio, the cliffs sloped down toward a quiet cove where gulls danced in the breeze. Inside, the house smelled like rosemary and warm wood. Maureen greeted us with open arms and a conspiratorial wink, saying, "So you're the woman who finally got him out of the library." I liked her immediately. She was brisk and clever, with a sharp laugh and the kind of warmth that made you feel as though you'd been friends for 20 years, even if you'd only just met. Robert and I settled into a small guest bedroom with yellow curtains and a worn writing desk that looked out toward the sea. I unpacked my clothes, my journal, and the letter I'd written for Noah, which I kept folded in the bottom of my suitcase like a prayer. We fell into a routine that was so gentle, so natural. I didn't even realize how much I'd needed it until I had it. Each morning began with tea on the patio. Robert would bring out a tray, always with extra honey, because he remembered I liked it that way. We'd sip in silence, listening to the sea below and watching the mist curl along the water like ribbon. Then we'd walk, sometimes down the winding path to the harbor, where fishermen mended their nets and children chased crabs along the rocks. Other times we wandered through the hills, surrounded by swaying grasses and purple foxglove. The only sounds are footsteps and the distant crash of waves. Robert told me stories about Elise, his late wife, and the summer she decided they should plant lavender because we ought to smell like joy even when it rains. About his childhood dog, Pip, who once dragged an entire ham off the neighbor's table during a picnic and was chased 3 blocks before surrendering. About the book he never finished writing and how he sometimes still dreamed entire chapters. I listened, and then I told my stories. About Alfred's proposal in the middle of a thunderstorm, because nothing says commitment like lightning. About Gavin's obsession with dinosaurs when he was 5, how he once insisted we set a place at the dinner table for a toy velociraptor. About the nights I stayed up sewing costumes for school plays, how I watched from the back row with a heart so full it hurt. And yes, I talked about the wedding. Not with bitterness, not with shame, but with clarity. I told him how Jennifer had screamed, how Gavin had looked away, how the people I'd loved most in this world had made me feel like a stranger, like a ghost at my own son's celebration. Robert didn't interrupt. He didn't try to fix it. He just took my hand in his and held it. That gesture said everything. As the days slipped into weeks, something remarkable began to happen. I stopped waiting. I stopped checking my phone, hoping for a message from Noah that would never come. I stopped wondering if Gavin would feel guilt, if Jennifer would lash out again, if Cynthia would appear at my door with another cruel accusation. I stopped living in the echo of their rejection. Instead, I started laughing again. Real laughter. The kind that bubbles up unexpectedly, full and bright, like a pot boiling over. I laughed when Robert dropped a whole tray of scones into the garden, only for a flock of seagulls to descend like pirates. I laughed when we tried to paint watercolor postcards, and mine ended up looking like abstract soup. I started living in the now. I learned the names of every flower along the cliffside path. I memorized the shape of Robert's silhouette as he read by the window. I grew used to the sound of the sea crashing beneath my dreams. And then, one evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned the color of ripe peaches, I sat beside Robert on a bench overlooking the water and realized something that stopped me cold. It didn't hurt anymore. Thinking of Gavin, of the son I had raised, loved, sacrificed for, of the man who had cast me aside for convenience, for status, for a woman who saw my love as an inconvenience and my presence as an eyesore. I still loved him, but I no longer ached for him. I had let go, not with fury, not with a grand declaration, but softly, like a tired breath released after holding it in too long. Robert looked at me, sensing something had shifted. "What is it?" he asked. I turned to him, the breeze lifting the ends of my scarf. "I think I'm finally free." He nodded, and we sat there until the stars came out, and the tide rolled in like a lullaby. On our last morning in the village, Maureen packed us sandwiches and gave me a hug that lingered just long enough to say, "You're welcome back, anytime," without needing the words. As we waited for the train, Robert turned to me. "You seem lighter," he said. "I am," I replied. He took my hand again, and I let him. Because life had given me grief, yes, but it had also given me a second chance, and I had chosen to take it. I used to think freedom was loud, defiant, dramatic, a slamming of doors and shouting down corridors. I know better now. Freedom is quiet. It's waking up and not feeling dread in your chest. It's boiling water for tea in a kitchen where every item is yours, chosen, placed, and used with care. It's no longer flinching when the phone rings or waiting for the next emotional blow to land. It's peace, and I live in it now, every single day. After we returned from the coast, something in me had shifted. Not temporarily, not as a holiday high, but at a cellular level. I was not the same woman who had stood alone at her son's wedding, eyes stinging as strangers raised glasses to a future that had no place for her. I was not the woman who had been berated by her daughter-in-law and dismissed by the child she once rocked to sleep. I was not broken. I had been buried. And now I was blooming. Every morning, I open the windows of my flat and let the breeze roll through the rooms. I say good morning to my plants, yes, aloud, and touch each leaf like it's sacred. My peace is in the routine now. The ordinary, unremarkable things I once overlooked because I was too busy carrying everyone else's burdens. I go to the cafe down the street and the barista knows my name. He gives me extra foam on my cappuccino and says things like, "You have a kindness about you." Once that would have made me shrink. Now I receive it, like sunshine. I attend a poetry reading on Thursdays, even though I've never written a poem in my life. I go just to sit with strangers who are brave enough to spill themselves into verses. There's something holy about people speaking their truths, raw and unashamed. Sometimes I write too, not for anyone, just for me. Little notes in the margins of my journal. The wind sounds different today. Or, I laughed without remembering why. That feels like healing. I used to live in a house that held the ghost of a family. Now I live in a home that holds me. Just me. And that's enough. I think about Gavin sometimes. Of course I do. I think of the boy with skinned knees and cereal on his chin, who once gave me a handmade Mother's Day card with too much glitter and a backward G. I don't hate him. I don't love him the same way either. Not blindly, not desperately. I've put down the illusion. He is who he is. And I am no longer holding out my heart in my hands, like a gift he'll one day notice. Jennifer doesn't cross my mind much anymore. When she does, I feel something that almost borders on pity. A woman so obsessed with power she trampled over kindness. I'm no longer angry, just free. As for Noah, I still hold out hope, but it's a soft hope now, one that doesn't ache. I believe, when he's old enough, when he's strong enough to question the stories he's been fed, he'll seek out his truth. And maybe he'll find my letter. And maybe he'll come. But I no longer wait for him like I used to. I live. Robert and I see each other often. We read aloud to each other sometimes, sections of novels or silly headlines from the newspaper. He's building a bird feeder for my balcony, and every time we go to the hardware store, he forgets one crucial item, and we laugh the entire walk back. There's no label on what we have. It doesn't need one. We hold hands when we feel like it. We sit in silence when words feel too heavy. We are simply two people who care for each other, walking side by side. No obligation, no performance, only presence. One evening, I stood on my balcony at dusk and watched the city settle in. The lights flickered on, one by one, like stars being remembered. I was wrapped in a shawl Maureen had knitted for me, holding a cup of mint tea, and the air smelled like rain on warm pavement. And I realized I wasn't surviving anymore. I wasn't enduring. I wasn't getting through the day in quiet misery, pretending everything was fine, so that others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. I was alive, truly alive, grateful, whole. I am not needed, perhaps, not in the way I once was, but I am wanted. By the earth, by the air, by the little joys that greet me every morning without asking anything in return. I'm no longer a prop in someone else's life. I'm the author now. And I'm still writing.